Seems legit.
Alright guys, so let's talk about a pattern. So when you first open it, there'll be two main components. There will be actual paper instructions, and then there will be this nightmare. So before we go any further, you also want to go on the back, and it tells you how much fabric is required for each size. So for the quick sew patterns, they do both yards and meters, so no matter where you live, you know what you want. And then they've got a short and a long version of this, which you can see on the front, but they always do a picture drawing on the back just to show you what the front and the back will look like. Suggested fabrics is exactly that, suggested. So cotton blends, denim, linen, or crepe. So that to me says don't use stretchy fabrics for this. That's pretty much what sums that up as. And the reason you wouldn't use stretchy fabrics is because we do cut like a semicircle. So some of it will drop and then it wouldn't be an even bottom, which you could level out, but it obviously takes more skill to do that. So because this is a nice, simple, learn to sew dress, you do want to kind of stay within the boundaries of what they're suggesting. So cotton blends, denim, linen, crepe. I'm actually going to be using what's it called? Rayon, which is a cellulose. So it's kind of like cotton, so it will be fine. It's just lightweight and flowy. The denim, I would be using like a Tencel denim, like a lightweight one. I wouldn't make it out of like denim that you make jeans out of. That would be insanely heavy and it wouldn't flow nicely. Right, so that's that. Then, on the first page, it's going to show you again the front and the back of the versions you want to do. So because usually you're not allowed to open patterns in the store, so that's why they've got it here. And then down underneath here, it shows you all the pieces, and they've labeled them 1 to 6. And you can see that most pieces are the same. You just cut here for the long one and here for the short one. So this is what the pattern pieces will look like on the tissue paper. So now when we open this up, when I first started, I used to do all these things. Now I can kind of skip over a lot of it because I know what I'm doing. But no matter what the pattern is, I will always check to see if it needs to be out of like a cotton or a stretch fabric because it is important. So this first section here will just tell you how to like measure for the pattern suggested. It also teaches you how to lengthen and shorten your pattern here. Although because it is a longer just skirt, you could just make that little circle longer. But it does actually teach you, so you cut at specific points and then you just add a bit of stuff to make them taller. So they do teach you all of that here. The next picture here is the best way to cut your fabric so that you can fit the whole pattern. So when it suggests how much fabric you need, that is to line up the fabric exactly shown in this picture. So that's another thing you will need to know. And so then dress A and dress B, it's all the same thing. And what else do I need to... Alright, so now we're going to move on to the actual pattern pieces. They're usually folded a lot neater than what I've done them. I was in a hurry, so I just didn't bother. Alright, so on this piece, this is how it came. I do not cut my patterns. And the reason for this is literally why we're doing this today. If you need a different size and you cut it off, you will have to buy the whole pattern again. Or if you lose a piece, once you've cut it out, if you lose a piece of the pattern, again, you will have to buy it again. And patterns are becoming quite pricey. So like full price patterns at Spotlight, if you don't get them in a deal, are like $20 or more. Some of them are like $28, and I don't want to spend that over and over and over for the same thing. So I don't cut them. This is how it come in the package. So I'm going to adjust the camera and then I'm going to explain all the stuff on the pattern. Alright, so this might be a little bit tricky to see, but I will do my best. So here, it always has the brand and the pattern number. So I will always keep reference to these, so that way you know that this one lives in that container, or box or whatever, however you store them. And then it tells you it's piece number 1. So referencing back to here, these tell you what all the pieces are, and this will be relevant as to how they build it. They usually number them in the order in which you're going to need them to sew. So you'd start with piece 1, move on to piece 2, etc. So this is piece 1. It says it's for the A and the B because of the length. This is the front piece, and you need to cut 2. So when they say cut 2, you always need to have one mirrored. They don't put that on patterns like bag patterns do. So when it says cut 2, you're going to cut 1 this way, and then you're going to flip it over and cut 1 the other way if you've got the fabric sitting up, or you can fold it. We'll get to that. This here actually says shorten or lengthen here. So if you have a longer torso, you could actually add a piece here. So when tracing it out, you'd cut here and then you could add it in to make it longer. So they've got 2 of those. They've usually got one at like the hip line and one at more of the waistline. So they've got those bits there. So that is how you would extend this pattern to make it longer. Because if you extend it at the bottom, you're going to have more of a circle and you'll need more fabric, like a lot more. Anyway, so that's what that bit is. It also, on this pattern, it has the measurements here. So it says all the different sizes and what your measurements need to be at the bust. So that's for that. So basically, because this is a floaty fall off you dress, you just need to make sure it's going to fit you at the bust section. And then we move over to here. So this section here is telling us this is the armhole, and then it's got all the sizes. So this particular pattern is in small, extra small, etc. Some of the patterns will be like 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Then we move kind of up the armhole, and you can see here these little notches. These, I don't always mark these. Sometimes I do, depending on which one they are. But this is so that you can line up this piece with piece, like the lining piece, which I assume is piece number 2. Yes. So these are little notches, so you can actually make a little notch in your fabric. And then when you go to line them up, it will ensure that this is perfectly lined up where it needs to be. So they'll have different notches. This is probably not the best pattern to show because they won't have a lot. But sometimes they have 1 notch and sometimes they have 2. It's so that you can help to line all of those notches up. So see, this is the piece number 2 and there's the matching notch. So when you are joining the fabric, those 2 notches will perfectly match up together. It's kind of like finding the center, how I do in my other patterns, but because it's on a curve, that's what these notches are. So if you're just starting out, I do recommend using these because it will help. This will be on a 45 here, which means it will stretch and could potentially stretch out of place. So the notches will just help prevent that. So now we're going to move on to here. This one says center fold. So you actually cut it with this folded. Sometimes they also use like an arrow, 2 arrows that are joined by a line to tell you that this is a fold section. They just didn't do it on this pattern, and that's okay. But again, they've got all that information. So you need to cut 1 on fold, and then cut 1 of interfacing. So it will tell you everything you need to cut on the pieces. Then let's move on to piece 3, because I can see it's got some different markings that we're going to need. These dots here, now I know because I've read the pattern and made one, these dots are the placement dots for your back strap. So you do need to mark, whatever size you're making, you do need to mark these 2 dots because the strap will sit in between them. And then when we mirror this over, it will do the same thing. So you do need to mark these ones. Otherwise, you're going to have to pull the pattern piece back out to find them and make sure you put it in the correct position. If you put your straps in the wrong position, you might make them too wide or too skinny, and then they won't fit the way they're meant to. I'm just trying to see. This big long line here, this is called the green line, and it always points in the direction and has a single arrow at the bottom. Now, this is relevant for multiple reasons. If you're ever using velvet, velvet has what's called a nap. So when you touch the velvet, it'll smooth down one way, and then when you run your hand the other way, it kind of goes all funny. When making a pattern, you always want to make sure that the pattern is going the right way. So if I had a directional print, I need to make sure that it's facing that this way is the bottom. So that's what this does. And you also line up this line with the selvage edge of your fabric to ensure that the grain of the fabric is going the right way. So if I was going to make this, I've got a piece of fabric here. It's fabulous. It will be in a video, I promise, eventually. So this selvage edge would need to perfectly line up with, so if I put it like that, I'm going to cut the fabric wrong. It needs to line up perfectly from the edge. So to do that, you can use a ruler or something like that. So that, and most pieces, not all, but most pieces will have this. The ones that don't are usually the ones you cut on the fold, because you're going to fold the fabric perfectly in half. So for example, there's not one on piece 2 because I have to fold that in half, so that will be in line with the selvage edge. It's just, yeah, it's one of those things that they have marked on there. But other than that, I think that's all the markings we need to go through. But you do need to make sure that you put the piece number, and I always like to write on my copy, and I'm going to show you how we copy it in a minute, but I like to write the pattern brand, the pattern number, and then the pattern piece. You can also cut one on fold, you can write all of that stuff, and I also like to write the size that I've traced out. I already did this dress for me, but like I said, I need to make it for my friend, and she has a bigger bust than me, so I need to cut a bigger size for her. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to change over the angle of the camera, get out my stuff so we can trace the pieces we need. Alright, things I am now going to use to trace out my pattern. You're going to need scissors to cut it out. I just use a normal pen. You can also use a grey lead or whatever floats your boat. I usually use blue or black because it's easier to read. I like to use a ruler because this will get me nice straight edges. I'm just using my 1x14 inch, and then this stuff. So depending on where you live will be dependent on what it's called. I call it trace and toil. It's also called pattern trace. It's got another name too that I can't remember. But basically it's super see-through. And like it's a fabric, so you can't just tear it, which is important. You can trace these out of like baking paper or whatever if you wanted to, but they will tear. Whereas this is kind of like a fabric, so it's not going to tear, which means that your pattern will last longer. I've also got a tub to throw all the pieces in when I'm ready. I'm just going to put the tub on the floor though. I also usually put all of the stuff I'm not about to use also in the tub. It will clear my space, ready to go. Okay, so let's start with the first piece. And now you don't have to cut them in order. That's something that is important. You want to cut them the way it best suits you. So I'm making the short version. So the long version comes all the way down to here. It also has a pocket, but I won't be doing that either. Mainly because I don't have time. So we only need to do it to the short line, which is here. And then I'm just going to flatten this out. Now, if yours is super crinkled because you pulled it out and then literally scrunched it into a ball to stick it away, you can iron this so it goes flat again. That's not a big problem. But I am going to make an alteration to this. I have already done a video where I did this and you had to do a join in the middle. Today we will not be doing that join. Today I am going to, so this is the armhole. So over here I'm going to take off the seam allowance so I can cut it on the fold. Just because I can. So we're going to roll this out, and what I'm trying, oops, well that's definitely rolled out now, just fell on the floor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the edge of this with the edge of the pattern, so it's one less line I don't have to cut. Now I won't always do this, I just am today. What size am I cutting? I'm cutting the extra large because she's not an extra large person, but she has an extra large chest, and that's pretty much the point of this. So you know what, it didn't work out and I don't have my pattern weights here. Usually I use pattern weights as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the ruler and rule the straight edge. You can fight with it. I can't be bothered. Sometimes it's not worth the fight to save that little piece. It's just not worth it sometimes. So I like to use my ruler to get the edge straight. Then I also use the ruler to do the curves. I just find that I get a better, thicker line. I'm literally just tracing what I can see underneath. Now, you probably can't see it very well on camera, but in front of me, because it's trace and toil, it's see-through. So I can see exactly what I'm doing. Right, and then we're going to come and we're going to put that little notch on. Right, you just draw a little triangle. You can draw it inwards or outwards. Some people do it outwards instead, so that you're not going within the seam allowance. Whatever makes you happy, really. And then we want to come all the way out to here. So here's the edge, but I want to come in. Basically, I'm just going to take off the seam allowance, so I can just come down here this way. So I'm just not going to do that last little bit, so I can cut this on the fold. Now, you can do it without a ruler like that. Straight lines are definitely easier with it. Now, if you were going to alter this, you'd put through those middle lines that the pattern has, but I won't be doing that. Right, so we're going to come out to here, and then here is the bottom edge. Now, these patterns all include seam allowance, so I'm not worried about that either. Like that. So now that's the edge. I am now going to write quick sew, and then it was K41 something. 4172. Spotlight no longer sell this pattern, by the way. I do the pattern number and I put it in a circle. Then I say what it is. And then I'm going to, over on here, I'm going to do the triangle, and then this little symbol. So in other pattern brands, this is like a universal symbol for cut on the fold. So I'm going to put it there so that I remember to do that. And so it's front, cut one on fold, and I did the XL. So I like to put the size as well because this is the second time I'm tracing this. So I've done my size, this is a different one. I don't want to accidentally cut the wrong stuff. It won't mesh together. So that's that piece, and then when you lift it up, see, you can see all of, well, you can't really see because of the lighting, but you can see I've drawn all of the markings and transferred everything I need. We're not doing the pocket. Also, pockets are pretty universal. If you've traced a pocket for a different pattern, they're all much of a muchness, so you can just use that one. It's one of those interchangeable things. So if you've cut a pattern piece, you could almost keep it in a drawer, and if any patterns require pockets, you can just use that as the general inseam pocket. Obviously different pockets are made different ways, but the inseam one, you can do it like that. So now we're going to grab this piece, and the front and the back are very different, so you can't just trace a front and a back and be done. So even though sometimes they'll look very similar, especially on like circle skirts and stuff, but they're not the same, so please trace all the pieces. So now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do piece 2. I'm not doing it in order because I need to do it in order. I've got this space here that will fit the pattern piece, and I don't like to waste stuff unnecessarily. So we're just going to pop that here like this and then trace around it. Again with my ruler because I like my ruler. So this is going to be on the fold, so I'm going to do my little triangles, line up and across. That's Simplicity McCall's definitely have that. That's why we're doing it. And we're just going to trace along that line. It sometimes can get a bit crazy if you're doing like the middle size. Sometimes you will have to pull that back because they get quite close to each other. But that's okay. I do that a lot too. So like right here, it's hard to see which curve I'm going to need. Oh, also, I've just realised that that is overlapping there, so that's not going to work. Bugger. So, I'm going to flip it. So I was tracing it fine. This is why I use pattern weights normally. I was tracing it all fine and dandy, but it can't cross over the other one. So to prevent this, what I can do is actually just cut this out. So it does cut quite easily, as you can see, but it won't tear. It's why we use it. It's almost like an Enviro cloth, except it's not environmentally friendly, I don't imagine. Alright, so we'll chop that bit off. Oops, and there goes my pattern piece. That is the other curse of tissue paper. It flies away. But I have already packed my pattern weights because I've packed up most of my sewing room. So I just have to survive without them. Or I can walk around the house and get other heavy things. A tape dispenser is an excellent pattern weight. So I've chopped up there, and then I just need to cut this curve. Sometimes it's easier to cut it off the bulk and then do this little bit. There was nothing I could make out of this. It is what it is. Then I like to just fold it neatly and stick it in the tub. So let's try that again. Alright, my makeshift pattern weights are my tape dispenser, because it's a nice heavy one, a stapler, and the window cleaner I've been using, which is methyl and water. It's been working wonders. So again, we're going to lay this out. And try that again. Now I've wrecked that bit now. Because I've drawn on it wrong, it's got to go. I will probably use it later for a different piece. Now that I think about it, I do have this piece down here, which is piece number 5. See how it's a nice small bit? We can definitely get that bit out of here. So, pattern weight. You don't want to put them on where you're trying to work. You just want to kind of do it around it. And preferably also not in your way, which doesn't always work out. This will just stop it slipping while we trace it. So I'm trying to get all the way to here. Sometimes it's easier to go backwards like this. And you have to push fairly firm with your pen too. It's why I go back and forth in this motion. It looks like I'm sketching, but I'm actually just making sure that it's tough enough to actually mark. So, quick sew. Okay, 4172, piece number 5, which is the back facing. It's always nice to know what it's called. Now, you won't see this piece when you're wearing it. So if you have to cut this piece upside down, or like an ugly bit, if you've got a large print, this is the bit you won't see, so it won't matter what it looks like. But it's just good to know, which is why you write it on there. Because after you've made not a few, but after you've made, let's say 20 dresses in different patterns, you'll start to feel that there's a pattern, and writing it on here means you won't have to constantly reference the pattern when cutting. So we're going to cut one, on fold, and then cut one interfacing. Size extra large. Just so I know. And there's not a whole lot of difference in the sizings, so don't be offended if you are extra large. She's not a big person. She just has a big chest. And this particular pattern, that's where you mark from. Other patterns that you'll come across will actually come with the different cup sizes, so that you might, if you basically you copy your bra size. If you're a 10C, you'll cut the 10C patterns. If you're, an 8F, they sometimes have that. Sometimes you might have to alter it. All right, pop that aside. We've done the little one. There'll still be more little ones. There's this actually, here you go. Here it is right here. So this is the shoulder strap for the back half. So again, I can get it out of this piece. I don't like to waste stuff, so it's always, I don't keep these after I've finished pattern tracing, but I will try and use them up as best I can while I'm tracing out a pattern. I'm not having a drawer of scraps. There's limits. I need to move it down because I drew on that bit. So I won't keep a drawer of scraps, but I will try and use them up while I'm tracing. And sometimes, if there's a few dresses I want to make, sometimes I'll just spend my sewing time tracing all the patterns out. I'll do one at a time, cut them and put them in bags so I don't get all the patterns mixed up. But once it's all out, I may as well do it all at once, because there's never just one dress I want to make. There's always like 3 or 4. So this one has a grain line. So we're actually going to draw that on, which is here. And I always use a ruler to make sure that it is appropriately straight. And then we're going to write the info on again. Piece 4, strap, cut 4. So again with this cut 4, 2 will be reversed. Literally half of everything you cut needs to be reversed. Cut 4, size extra large. So that's now all the info on there. And then we just continue doing that, and that's how you cut out all of the pattern. I might try and do another video if I can fix my overlocker, and I will show you how to sew it once and follow the exact instructions and kind of translate what they're trying to say, because sometimes some words can be confusing. But that is how you cut and read the pattern pieces. I hope that was helpful, guys, and I will, oh, actually, I forgot one bit. I'm just looking at these dots. There's some dots over here. This is where the pocket goes. So you need to put these markings on too. I did forget the pocket ones. In the same sense that we mark the back, we also mark where the pocket goes, because you don't want them too high or too, too low. Alright guys, I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.